Right, right.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, so that's a very interesting direction we are moving into. So I would like to just present like an analogy which I sort of heard from one of the podcasts that we often listen to. It's The Seen and the Unseen by Amit Verma.
Amit Verma.
Um, yeah. So the analogy goes something like this, and I'm sort of bringing this in because there were initial topics of science and humanities, or how do we jump between each other, right? So the whole idea of, as far as I remember, in that episode, they talk about how sciences are connected at the root. So, for example, something like medicine is very much deep rooted or has its base on biology, right? Like they're using those core ideas to sort of apply them and create the field of medicine. And biology itself as a field is again rooted on the base and the core application of chemistry, right? We're thinking of like in terms of molecules and how they behave with each other, how certain interactions lead to certain life forms. That's what biology is about based on chemistry. And double downing on chemistry, you see that chemistry is all about interaction of atoms and how those molecules are then creating certain chemical behaviors, which is all about physics, right? And if you go into physics, that's again all about maths, because the way those vectors, those logics are interacting with each other is how you're able to sort of define those atoms, right? We go into like electrons, neutrons, and to a certain extent this is where it gets interesting. Math, to be very specific, is the application of basic logics, which is a philosophy, right?
Yeah, philosophy, philosophy.
So it's everything is coming out of philosophy, right? So how do you
Yeah,
think, like,
true.
yeah, across these elements where we say that there is a base, there is application, what is the base and application nature for something like psychology?
So, just to add a perspective here, I think you are very right in the sense mathematics and all of this, in fact, originates in philosophy. So, in the study of philosophy, there is something called in modern philosophy, especially something called the turning point of philosophy. Okay, so at the beginning of 20th century, there was a crisis in philosophy. I mean, there have been many crises in philosophy. Like Immanuel Kant solved one crisis in philosophy by resolving the issue between matter and mind. So, like those kind of crises keep happening. But philosophy faced a deep crisis in the 20th century. It was resolved by in fact by science. So what happened was, you have these all these fields, right? The philosophy of science, for example, Karl Popper is a famous person. Then philosophy of politics, for example. So it has been a very old field of study. So what happened was, there was a conference in which physicists met and decided that they will let philosophers uh, answer some of the fundamental questions. So obviously, philosophy takes on questions which none of our active fields can answer, and when they have studied it sufficiently, then they pass it on. Quantum mechanics. So all of these quantum physicists I have been professors as well. Einstein, for example, a lot of his writings, if you study, are also on philosophy. Newton was a very big theologist, for example. So he is obviously has written a lot. So I think that is very right in point, Rudresh, that philosophy gives these problems, right, passes it down essentially, and that turning point in philosophy, that event, led to creation of these subfields. So psychology, for example, also has a philosophy attached to it. So that's the theoretical aspect of it, and then you have the application. So for example, engineering is the applied part of physics. That's generally like considered a common refrain, right, in relationship between engineering and physics. So I think you are right that philosophy lays the foundation for the study of many things. But I think
Right.
after that, application of it becomes the part, and there has been a movement towards that in philosophy. But earlier philosophers were majorly theoretical. Obviously, philosophy in general is theoretical, but yeah, there has been a movement, market movement in study of now you have philosophy of language, philosophy of science, and a bunch of sub fields of philosophy.
Right, right. So the application part which you're mentioning here, I think, is it about, like, for example, you're saying mechanical engineering is the application of physics, or chemical engineering is the application of chemistry, something like that?
Yeah, yes, yes, very true.
Okay, makes sense, makes sense. So, I mean, probably I think Simrat would be the right person to sort of cater this question to. Like, what do you think is sort of the equation with psychology, as to what is the application of psychology, or is psychology itself an application of something, as we mentioned that the core is philosophy?
Hmm. Yeah. I think yeah, it's definitely a very thought-provoking question and something that would require a lot of digging also. But I was thinking about it when Parth mentioned about just Einstein and Newton, all of these people, the polymaths generally. When you look at even the Renaissance period, you see Leonardo da Vinci, you see Michelangelo, you see all of the geniuses of that time were also all polymaths. I think there was just so much knowledge that they were taking in, that they were philosophers, they were artists, they were mathematicians. Like, it was just countless, and I think that was the peak of our human existence. I feel we really did peak there. And with regards to how psychology has kind of come in the modern times, I feel like psychology is making philosophy more accessible in a way, because at least that's how I felt when I was delving into the subject field. And of course, there are a lot of schools in psychology that do exist, which also have a philosophical, very, very philosophical bend of mind, which is the existential school of therapy. So I'm fairly certain that you guys might have heard of something called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor
Yeah,
Frankl.
Viktor Frankl.
Um, and he derived a lot from Soren Kierkegaard and a lot of these existential philosophers. They just don't come to my mind immediately, but when you do go into the core of philosophy, what you really do, even Nietzsche, for that, I'm pretty sure I'm mispronouncing his name. I suck at that, but the
Nietzsche.
philosophy. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead. Nietzsche. I think you are
Nietzsche.
right. You are not
Right,
wrong.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Absolutely. So, when I kind of delved into the more existential school of thought, I really appreciated philosophy a lot more. And since I also have like a background in political science, I just felt like psychology brings in the more individual aspect of bringing your thought and bringing that to the table. So, in terms of the application bit, it psychology, especially in the way that I'm kind of practicing it right now, the most direct application in the modern age is therapy. Counseling is one way of doing it, but of course HR is also a form of an applied field of psychology. You could consider that, and there are other fields as well. So there are sports psychologists, there are clinical psychologists, there are industrial psychologists. So there are a lot of applied fields, but I feel that when it comes to reasoning out and having a conversation, essentially philosophy does have a huge role in driving psychology. I feel like without that, it would be empty. And even the meaning of psychology is derived from that, which is psyche, the soul, and the logos, of course, being the meaning. So it's actually an outgrowth of philosophy in that
Right,
sense, I suppose.
right. So that's very interesting. So many threads from that to just like understand